Welcome to the Insight Meditation community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform, for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
Again, a warm welcome to all of you. And I want to light a candle now. And we've done this as a bit of a ritual. So light this candle as a way of remembering and honoring the earth with whom our existence depends, the Monacan Indians who lived here on this land, and really all our ancestors, those loved, those unknown, to whom we owe this one precious life. Friends, children, trees, the oceans, animals, with whom we weave this one precious life. May we be suffused with gratitude and with compassion. And I would invite you just to look around to see who's here tonight. We come together as a community, as a Sangha, to practice together and to relate to one another. And if you would please, looking around and considering your one precious life, if you can think of a word perhaps or a phrase that would name something you're grateful for in this moment, and take a minute to type it out in the chat box. Just a word, just a phrase. It's a way we can connect with one another and sort of see what's here. What are you grateful for right now? Rain, Sangha, a warm, dry house, shelter, breath, safe housing, cooler weather, family, my chilly basement, the quilt of beautiful faces, health. Connection, being here with everyone. Swimming, feel free to keep those responses coming. It's just fine. So I want to start tonight with a quote from the Buddha. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love born out of concern for all beings. Back in June, I gave a talk that was related to this phrase, love born out of concern for all beings. The talk was called Compassion, Essence for Survival. Don't worry if you didn't hear it or listen to it. It's not necessary for tonight's talk, but I will continue with that theme a bit. This talk is more about watching the thought, as the Buddha says, watching the thought and its ways with care. And we could consider that to be a part of wise view or right understanding, which, as you know, is an element of the Eightfold Path. And this concept of wise understanding or right view embodies a whole lot of territory. It takes in the Four Noble Truths, the three marks of existence, the Brahma Viharas, the five precepts, all of these elements interwoven. And tonight we're just going to look at one particular understanding, if you will, and that's our view, or the one that has been conditioned by our living, our growing up, our being, and our relationship to the earth. And I'm also going to offer a couple of poems because I think sometimes those can be a gateway or a window into wise understanding or view. Then, as you listen tonight, even though it's hearing is happening and thought processing is happening, to keep awareness and mindfulness of the body. Be aware of your sensations in the feet, in your hands, the muscles in the face. So, according to Buddhism, their understanding could be termed in two different ways. Sometimes when we use the word understanding, we're actually referencing knowledge, or an accumulated memory or an intellectual grasping of a subject according to certain given data. And that kind of understanding is sometimes called knowing accordingly. And the second kind of understanding is one that's a little bit deeper. Sometimes the word penetration is used to describe this kind of understanding. It's seeing a thing in its true nature without a name or a label. And wise view, as I'm looking at it tonight, really involves the conceptual, the intellectual, and the experiential understanding of what's true. Kind of an understanding of things as they really are, as they truly are. An example might be you're walking down a street and you see a tree in front of you, and just noticing what comes up, what thoughts arise. Can it be seen as a kind of living thing with great beauty and mystery? The temptation is to name it, to describe it, to consider other thoughts about it, whether it's an eyesore in the neighborhood or a reminder of trees that we climbed when we were kids, or a source of uh, hazard if the limbs fall. And the question is, can we simply see it for what it is, a thing of beauty, mystery, living on the earth? This poem is from Robert Frost, and it's called Tree at My Window. Tree at my window, window tree, my sash is lowered when night comes on. But let there never be curtain drawn between you and me. Vague dream head lifted out of the ground, and thing next most diffuse to cloud. Not all your light tongues talking aloud could be profound. But tree, I have seen you taken and tossed. And if you have seen me when I slept, you have seen me when I was taken and swept and all but lost. That day she put our heads together. Fate had her imagination about her. Your head so much concerned with outer, mine with inner weather. So, a question for us with regard to the earth, what is our view? What are our thoughts, our concepts about earth? How do we understand earth? Maybe we see it as a watery planet spinning through space, or a large hunk of rock circling the sun, or as something that's both beautiful and complex, the environment upon which we depend for life. And so, one consideration is, do we see the earth as a living, sentient being? And that relates a bit to our ideas about consciousness, and whether or not consciousness belongs solely to humans, to all living beings, to earth. Though the Buddha says, watch the thought and its ways with care. Many voices have urged us to consider that we are perhaps at kind of an evolutionary juncture, that really what's required is a shift in thinking and in consciousness and in how we view the earth. So, for many of us, our worldview has been one of largely uh, white industrial growth society that's been anchored in individualism, hierarchy, and materialism. And the conditioning that we've experienced is that we have a belief that somehow we needed to master the natural world around us. So we've studied the earth and the cosmos and tried to discover what the essential building blocks of life are, largely so that we could manipulate them in some way into more efficient mechanisms to provide for our wants and needs. But the problem is that we've acted as if we could know and control the world from the outside, as if we somehow were separate from it. Then, for many, we came to think of ourselves as a little higher on the totem pole, or made of better stuff than the animals and the plants and the rocks and the water around us. And if we were to look at our technologies and consumption of the last century or more, we can see what that has done to us, to the earth. So, to see our own human centeredness is to see how deeply embedded it is in our culture and consciousness. Now, just to pause and note what's felt in the body, in the mind. And one of the things we notice is that to be conscious in our world today is to be aware of vast suffering and unprecedented peril. And with this typically comes grief, a kind of a profound combination of fear and anger, sorrow. And it lies in our concern for our personal well being, but it's also in great apprehension of collective suffering, what's happening to our own species, what's happening to all other species, what's happening to the legacy of our ancestors, to unborn generations, and to the living body of Earth. We feel distress on behalf of the larger whole of which we are a part. So, watching thoughts and feeling states with care now, just to see what's here now. One poet has this to say: the floor is cold, the ground frozen. This is the bottom, all the world's seeds have wound down. And just when the stem of my spine seems to have dried up and become a stalk on which my head merely nods, just when I think nothing is left alive, the bare branches of the trees rise up, beckoning. And it isn't simply that I want to go out to them, they also want me to come. Come, they say, in their motion, in their scraping of branch against branch, like a woman rubbing her hands together. Come with us where we are going. Walk with us up into the wind. And there's an Australian rainforest ecologist, John Seed, who has written this. He says, when humans investigate and see through their layers of anthropocentric self cherishing, a profound change in consciousness begins to take place. Alienation subsides. The human is no longer a stranger apart. Your humanness is then recognized as merely the most recent stage of your existence. And you stop identifying exclusively with this chapter. You start to get in touch with yourself as mammal, as vertebrate, as a species only recently emerged from the rainforest. He goes on to point out that this liberation is more than an intellectual process. For him, as for many people, it's kindled and deepened by taking part in actions on behalf of the earth. So instead of saying, I'm protecting the rainforest, it becomes, I am part of the rainforest, protecting myself. I am that part of the rainforest recently emerged into thinking. So, what he's pointing to, and what's available to us now, is a bit of a different lens on reality of what's true. And it comes from contemporary science, and it finds support in ancient spiritual traditions as well. So, from quantum theory, it seems that the world, the universe, isn't composed of stuff at all, building blocks as such, but instead is a dance of energy and relationship with no real substance at all. And from a general living systems theory, we learn that the self organizing nature of reality and the presence of mind in nature, and maybe an example of this is something called emergent phenomena, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, or can't be predicted. The whole cannot be predicted based on its parts. An example of this is we can't predict the behavior of an ant colony from observing one ant. Other examples would be birds flocking together, um, fireflies synchronizing in a meadow, fish schooling in the ocean, individuals self organizing into neighborhoods and cities. So, in this way, a greater collective intelligence emerges from the group. Questions of consciousness, like Is it possible that consciousness is non-local, not limited in space or time, but inherent everywhere? So this new thinking, kind of a cognition revolution and spiritual awakening, both remind us again that our world is a sacred whole. And it can be liberating us from some kind of constricted notions of who we are or what we need or how it is. And we can come home to our true nature, which is encompassing, far more encompassing than the separate self as has traditionally been defined by society and by our habit life. And we rediscover that we are as intrinsic to the living world as the rivers and the trees, woven of the same intricate flows of matter and energy. And at some level, this experience of reconnection with the earth community arouses a desire to act on its behalf. And also, it can help us save us from succumbing to either panic or paralysis, because there's a lot to be done. Time is short. We don't know how this is going to turn out. And we could go forth with some degree of grimness or angry desperation. But whatever or however we choose to engage, it will proceed a lot more easily and productively if we come from an attitude of thankfulness for life, some sense of a view that's woven with care and equanimity, which helps heal and can offer a calm refuge for us. Sometimes it's helpful to remember what we already know in this process. So I'd like to invite us to remember the ethic of non-harming, one of the 5 precepts. And it's an ethic that's basic to many spiritual traditions. And the one that I'll read shortly is mostly Thich Nhat Hanh's version of the first precept, that of non-harming. And you might just close your eyes for a moment and feel the feet again, the hands, the back. And listen to this first precept. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of earth life, I vow to cultivate compassion and to learn the ways of protecting the lives of people, animals, plants, the planet. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of earth life, I vow to cultivate compassion and to learn the ways of protecting the lives of people, animals, plants, the planet. And I'll close with a short verse. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. So, again, thank you for being here tonight.